Welcome back. So last time we built a shopping list and added some styles to our web component. We used Bootstrap to do that, and we made it look a little nicer. It went pretty well, but today I want to focus on a slightly different problem. And this is going back to that cycle of enhancing the style of your page, enhancing the functionality of your page, enhancing the style of your page, enhancing the functionality of your page. And you find yourself in that cycle, and so now I think we can make this shopping list a little bit better. We call it a component, but really it's just a page. And so what I'd like to do is actually focus on making this a reusable component that we can instantiate from any page in our application. And that way we can give it its own unique data, its own unique ID, and it can be stored and managed separately and embedded in pages, or we can build a list of lists, anything we want to do. So today we're just going to do exactly that. We're going to build a list of lists out of these shopping lists. So we're going to actually componentize this list so that it can be instantiated from the main page of our application. So in order to do that, I'm going to have to make a few tweaks. The first is I'm going to have to move this page header. You remember I originally moved it into our component in the very first video, but now we're going to have to actually move it back. So let's go ahead and do that. So we're going to move it over here into app.html. And we also need to move the title out of our shopping list JavaScript file into the app. And when we do that, the shopping list title remains, but now it's managed outside of our component. The next thing we need to do is give our component a unique ID. So I'll call it list ID, and it needs to be bindable. This is just a little piece of functionality from the framework, a decorator. So we're going to import Aurelia framework for this bindable decorator, and this is going to allow us to instantiate our component. Additionally, we're going to use this ID throughout our JavaScript to actually persist a unique set of data for each list. So we're just going to cheat and throw the list ID on the end of these keys here. So all four places where I use that are set up. And now I can actually add this new custom attribute called list ID. And if I do that, I get a blank list here. So this is list ID 1. So I can add some items to this list, and we're actually persisting them under a unique ID. So you can see how we can kind of embed shopping lists anywhere we want now. Pretty easy change. And all that data gets persisted for list ID 1. But what if I want multiple lists? In order to do that, I need to build some sort of a component at a higher level that's actually tracking multiple lists and allows us to add and remove them. So I'm going to add a list of lists, repeat. We'll just keep it simple, call it list. We have to actually now bind this property, and we'll give it a variable name of list. But we have to actually have a model property for this, so we're going to add lists as a property to our view model. So we can actually add the number 1 in there and simulate having a list of 1. So that's list ID 1. And without it, we have no lists. So we can have multiple lists now, but we really need a way to add and remove them. So let's start with the concept of adding a list. Let's actually push an element onto the list, and these are just going to represent list IDs, and we'll just push the list length. So that grows each time the list is added to, and then we're going to persist the lists in local storage. We'll just refactor this into its own method called save lists. just as we did for our shopping list component. And we need to actually load these lists when we load the component. So let's actually do the inverse and actually get the lists. And we'll just refactor this and wrap it in some JSON calls, give it a variable, and do the same kind of thing where we check for null before initializing our list property. Refactor this into a method. And we'll actually move this up. I want these to look a little better. And then we'll actually put this in the bind callback and remove it from the constructor as well. So we're loading lists. And actually, I think I have a problem. So actually, I need to change stringify to parse. That was my bad. And now we're actually loading lists when we bind the component. Not too bad. So at this point, I'm going to get rid of my style. What we really need to do is actually add and remove lists. So we need some buttons to do that. And I'm going to keep it simple. My add list button is going to do a very simple thing and just add another list to the end of the lists property. So we'll just have a simple add button here. So it's going to be, new list. And let's go ahead and add an icon to it while we're here, so we can keep enhancing our styles now that we have Bootstrap in the application, and use a glyphicon here. And we want a remove button that's similar, so I'm just going to cheat and keep a very simple remove button that just removes the very last item from the list. So this will be a danger, so it'll be colored red, so it just looks kind of like this. Doesn't do anything. So let's actually add a click handler and trigger the add list method. Now something's wrong, but we also need to add our remove. So we'll fix the add here in a minute. It's sort of working, but we've got a bug. First, let's add the remove. So we'll remove list, and we haven't implemented that yet. But let's fix the bug that we have here. So we're actually adding list.length. I don't think that's what we want to do. So let's actually add lists.length -1, and that should fix that bug. And then let's go ahead and add our remove list method. So this one's a little trickier. We want to prevent underflow in our integer list array, so we're going to only remove from the list when the list is greater than 0, and we're going to slice the list, basically lop the last item off of the end. And then we'll save our lists field when we're done. Okay, so if I remove all of these, let's see. Okay, that's even worse. So it's persisting data, but I think the IDs are jacked up, so I think we can fix that. But let's just see if I have two lists, they both persist, but I think what amounts to list 1 is actually in position 3, which means I think I have some off by 1 or off by 2 errors in my logic here. So let's actually go back to our app and fix this. I think instead of -1, we actually want to do +1 when we add a list, because we'll start at essentially 0. And that looks better. Now the fruit list is actually the first list, and that was list number 1. So if I add new list, looks like it's working. I can persist items. Okay. So now we have list number 1 and list number 2. They each get their own data. And we can add more lists. So I'll just add some more test data here. We'll add a little bit more sensitive items to this list. And we'll add some unmentionables. Okay. So most things seem to be working. When I remove and add, it just comes back. So one thing that bugs me here is that when I'm in edit mode, my strikethrough doesn't apply to my text boxes. So this is just one piece of style that we missed last time. So I can fix that by just adding this computed class here to the input. And there we go. So everything appears to be working, and I fixed one style that was broken. And we have a list of lists. Very simple. You could obviously do a lot more to improve the functionality by adding potentially delete buttons with each list instead of allowing to just add and remove from the end of the list of lists. There's lots of things that you could do here. This is just a very basic list of lists, but you get the idea. So thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.